First thing I'd like to show is our plan for what the chat flyout will look like for a customer that is not entitled to use chat or use AI. So this is just a Rover Web implementation here. The chat flyout shows up in the bottom right hand corner. There's a couple things that we can show here. We've added sensitivity to the route that the user is currently on. So you'll notice that the prompts are changing as we move throughout the system. We'll touch on that a little bit further later. But what we've done here is we've given the ability for the chat to look and feel like it will in a production environment where they are entitled to use AI. But if they click on one of the prompts, it will give them a sales type message saying, hey, we see you're interested in AI. Click here to email us about that. And if they would try to interact with it, they'll get the same kind of a message. So that's the plan for kind of rolling it out to show people that it exists and tease them with it and to hopefully generate some sales inquiries related to it. So now let me transition to an actual working version here. Okay, so like I mentioned, we now have context that changes as you move throughout the application. So the prompts are coming up and they are appropriate to where the user is in the system. And they will actually change. So now I'm in the customer section. If I didn't have a customer selected, the prompts will change. So here's a prompt that says, what customer is most delinquent? If I click on that, there's nothing like live demos, but we'll see how it does with this question.
And we're still using Informer as the data source, and we're still using ChatGPT, OpenAI APIs for the AI assistant to be able to hook into things. So it's Informer talking to those APIs to be able to piece it together. But Greg's able to take, like, we know where we're at in the application, so we can tell the AI assistant, hey, based off of the user being in this area, like these are some helpful prompts that we want to kick things off with, right? So that's kind of how the contextual awareness of the prompts is working right now. What that also does is you could imagine like some capacity for the user to save some of their favorite prompts, right? So, or even come up with a new one and then say, yeah, I want to add this to my list of favorites. And so not only can we inject prompts that we're thinking would be helpful based off of the location inside the app, but also, a user has the opportunity to then inject their own. We haven't wired that piece up of it, but that's just a little bit more work on the web side of it to carry that around, right?
I think we've also had some discussion of knowing what the user's role is and potentially changing some of the defined prompts based on what kind of users interacting with the system. So I think
Yeah,
that'll be useful. I
right.
don't know if anyone noticed, so I asked it what customer is most delinquent, and it initially came up with an error saying that it couldn't figure it out. And this is kind of a recent change since we've changed the AI model that we're using. It's much better at figuring out when there was a problem and kind of regrouping on how it's going to solve that question, and it ultimately generally gets it right. So I know it kind of blipped across the screen there, but it was starting to give us a message saying, I don't know how to figure this out. In order to do that, I would need to know this column. And then it retried and it figured it out. So I asked it what customer is most delinquent, and it came back with Smart Pharma Agency, and it gave me a receivables balance here. Kind of the interesting piece now is if I go into the point of sale system, we now have outstanding invoices where we get an aging summary, and you'll notice that those dollar amounts line up. So this was pulled from Rover BI data out of Informer, and this is live from the system on this demo account that we're currently interacting with. So the data matches, which is nice. One piece that I was hoping that I could show, we're starting to wire up additional functionality where we can ask it to take actions that then call our API layer. So I have one wired up that would allow me to send an invoice. It's currently broken, so unfortunately it's not really going to work. But I could say send invoice 101 to Greg B at suesmiths.com, and it will try to do it. It's going to call our custom plugin that we've built for Informer to provide that functionality. And it's going to fail because it doesn't have the right subscription key. It's seen that it's failing. And you'll see there that it's retrying it. Right. It's trying to figure out how to make this actually work. And it's ultimately not going to be able to do it because it doesn't know the subscription key. And it's really cool because it's actually responding with detail about our error message that came back from our API saying that it had a 401 status code, which is because I didn't pass a valid subscription key. So that would have been better if it actually worked, but it's really cool to see how the AI interacts with our API endpoints and can actually give the user meaningful information.
I think that the point I'd want to hang on here real quick is that we talked a lot and with the customer panel and internally. First phase of this thing is really going to be is like an enhanced way to ask questions of the data, right? Get more information out of your data, get to answers to these questions a little bit faster than a traditional way of having to navigate to a specific area of the application or having to go run a report and then open up the report, whether it came to you in a download or email or what have you, and get to the answer that way, to be able to ask those sorts of reporting type questions of the data straight away. Clear cut use case to us around the potential for AI. But what Greg is dipping into here next, that whole notion where it's not just OpenAI and Informer having that conversation about the data. It's also OpenAI being able to make API calls back to Rover, or really, because it's not limited to Rover, the backend system on the ERP side means you can start to open up things like, yeah, hey, system, go generate this PDF for me and send an email to this person, since that's a function the ERP can perform. Or you could, I think it's probably not tough to imagine then you just got off a sales call or you're on a sales call and you're meeting a new person at the customer and you don't really want to pull up the contact form and code it all in directly. So you say, hey, go create a new contact under this customer with this first name, email address, phone number, kind of a thing. And it can take that information and go write that record out to the system. So it becomes a whole other frontier of possibility there, and being able to change things or take some action beyond just answering reporting questions. It does get a little scary because now you're saying, hey, there's some capacity for this thing to be updating the system potentially if we light up access to those things. So I think you'll see us do that conservatively while all of this stuff continues to evolve. But it's really exciting because that update flow capability, right? That rounds out this thing's ability to be a proper assistant, right? And more than just a enhanced reporting engine. So some cool stuff here that we'll spend a little bit more dev time on, but you will see this make its way into production and turned on for Zoom Assist usage pretty soon here.
So here I asked it, how many sales orders have a back order status? And it correctly answered that there are 28. And then I asked it to prioritize the processing of these orders based on past sales to customers, give priority to customers with the most previous orders. So it went out and looked up the customers that have had the most previous orders. And now it's recommending to me which customer I should process orders for.
That we made were in the KPI cards, and they're just more, I guess, useful to somebody looking at them. So, for example, here we've got the actual date range that this data set is covering before it just had the current date, which isn't necessarily helpful. We've got it displaying the dollar amount of the orders placed. And one of the big changes here is that when we hover over a month, it will give you that the period which this amount is covering, the dollar amount, and then the actual number of records that are associated with that month. So we've got that, and the last change that we haven't yet implemented is that the default view will actually be be to see the dollar amount and not the percentage. And that percentage will be displayed in that hover data. And that's the same here with tickets. Here we're showing the tickets created per month. So that's useful information. And then the last thing is the invoices, which is probably the most complicated. This is the amount due by month. And you could see here that the date range is a little bit different than the ones here, which are going, 12 months previous to the current date. And the reason for that is a customer can have invoices that are due, ahead of today's date. So I have an invoice that's due in 2 months from now, or that kind of thing. So this basically, the data will shift to have the ending month be wherever their last invoice is due. So that's what you see here. And we've also got this little key here just to indicate what the current month is, since it might not be 100% clear if you're not, you don't use this regularly, or it's brand new, which it will be. And those are the biggest changes.
We made a lot of updates to the sales module. One of the first things you could see that is pretty much the same is that it's the opportunities, quotes, and orders. But now when you click on an opportunity, it pulls it up in our new tab sort of menu. And so now you're able to do multiple opportunities, quotes, and orders, and you could tab between all of them. So I'll open up a few. I'll open up this order, so 26020. And you could see in the orders tab, this is more of the ERP's view of, so now we have an upper tab, and then now an orders tab. So this is all the tabs for this particular order. And not everything is currently wired up, but I could show you a little bit of what is currently displayed. This is the header tab. So you get all the general information, the order ID, the PO, the customer, as well as the price codes. And then at the bottom, you could see the line items. And one of the newer things we've added is now you could click on a line item and it will extend here in this tab. So now we have information and line items. And this is where you see all the details for this particular line item. Not everything is currently viewable. We're still wiring this up, but soon you'll be able to see the image, and then you could do part lookups, and then you could see all this information that'd be similar to the desktop ERP system. But that is just some of the parts that we've done. Some of the new things we've done is if you create a new order, just bear with me for a moment. It does take a second for it to populate. Did I click it? No, it just took a lot longer than it should have. One of the new things we've added is the ability to copy an order. So we could type in 26020, and we could either copy the entire order or just the parts. So we're just going to do the parts today. So if we populate that, you could see that it's the same 3 line items that was in that previous order. So this should help if you have a lot of orders that are similar in nature, and you could just copy them through. There's a bit of a bug, so we wouldn't want the date to be the exact same. We'd want it to be either today's date or just clear that out. Another thing we could do, I need to add in a customer. So populate all the customers' information. So in order to search for a part, we need a price code, but we've also updated the price search. So if we type in cap, we see sort of this brand new redesign of the search for parts. So here we see all the parts that got returned from that query. We're also able to update it with a drill down for categories. So this will be all the categories for this this particular category, which is a one-piece wheel. And then from here, we could add this to the order. And then we could also, let's find a different one. Go to 2-piece wheel, and then we could add it here, and then we'll close. And then this all gets added to the line items here. And so from here, you have to save it to view the tab for that particular line item. That's something we're still working on. But once this is saved, we'll get this will update the view. we have a little bit of bugs that the header tab doesn't repopulate, but from here you could edit that particular line item.
I think so. The big thing is still a work in progress. A lot of the front end re-implementation's been done. A lot of it's down to now performance and wiring up of the data to the APIs and everything else. And then at that point, this thing will release into the test environment for people to play with a little bit further before it makes its way into production. So it's still a little more bleeding edge, but it's been the area that has been a little stop start as we focused on the customer sponsored areas and requests. We've been attempting to carry this thing forward, and it's much closer now than it has been previously. So the team's been working with the sales team on this one, but I don't know that too many people outside of sales had seen what's coming here. And the big takeaways are the same kind of search experience that you have in the customers module and the same approach to opening up and interacting with data records that you have in the customers module. We're getting away from the modal entry forms, giving you the ability to interact with multiple objects at the same time using the tabs. And if there is anything really novel about it, it's the fact that there is that second tab ribbon, since sales does, especially orders and quotes to a lesser extent, when you're talking about modifying the line level details of the record. There's a lot of fields in there. The desktop application and kind of previous pattern was to do a sort of an infinite scroll or use the previous next buttons to jump between those lines. And we talked to the team and looked at it and said, well, we are here on the web. We can try to keep things front and center, and we do have the capacity to have, almost a row of child tabs, if you will. So that's where you saw Christian open up a line and have that second row of tabs show up related to the current open order record. If you had multiple lines open on multiple orders, that second row of objects changes based off of whatever you have selected in the first row. So the context carries forth. Novel to us in terms of this application, not novel in terms of being a existing design pattern out there and in the wild. So some cool stuff. More to come. It's been a little bit since we showed you, so thank you for that.
So this customer has an online web presence. They've had a system for online presence for about 5 or 6 years that has a back-end PIM that's pretty robust. So they're like, hey, we want to utilize our PIM for point of sale. So this doesn't look like a lot, but we added these categories, which basically takes their enriched PIM data, and there's actually 32,000 items that are built into this category. So when you click on categories, you can drill down into tools. You're looking at tools. We can drill down into caulking guns. We can say, let's look at. So it has multiple drill downs to display the items. So we basically took their website drill downs and put it into point of sale, which to me, this is a big win to get into the hands of their sales reps as they're, getting ready to deploy this and start going through the testing process on their side. Then within the displays, we've enriched some of the data. Typically in Rover, we're just the proper, we're just showing part number. This customer wanted to see the UPC. They have an internal SKU number, case quantity. So we're able to take some attributes that may not be in everybody's version, but be able to deploy those for the specific customers using kind of this FDIC process. If we drill down into an item, we could show, the number of units sold in the last 12 months for particular items. So we're trying to just enhance this a little bit more so that as their sales reps get it in their hands, mostly out of the box, they're going to have everything that we know of that they need. And then we'll work out any issues that that they're looking for that we haven't provided, until you get it into the hands and you're using the real life scenarios. We really don't know until we get some of that feedback. But this was my big win, getting these categories, drilled down, and it can go down to 3 deep, which is pretty cool.
Very cool.